We are celebrating today the birth anniversary of an entirely new phenomenon in human history. Sri Aurobindo surely is the continuation of the long and hoary spiritual tradition which was fostered primarily in India. In fact, if you know his early association with the Indian freedom struggle, the turn he gave to the notion patriotism, you'll realize that India for him was not a geographical area. India for him was a principle, an idea, a dream. And it is significant that his birthday coincides with the Independence Day of the country. If India is in the kind of sorry mess that it is today, it is partly because it didn't heed Sri Aurobindo's cautions, his guidance, and we have paid a very bitter price for this. Now today I am not concerned with India per se, because as I said, and I have always maintained, that it is just an accident that Sri Aurobindo happens to be an Indian. Sri Aurobindo, in fact, represents the universal man, the man of tomorrow. Now, it is difficult even for Indians to understand Sri Aurobindo. And very often people ask, people who come to associations like this for spiritual illumination, for spiritual fulfillment, very often they ask, what are all these books about? What are all these photographs about? Hasn't India produced sages down the ages? Do we need a new sage? Do you need a new teaching? Aren't the Upanishads enough? Aren't the Vedas enough? Is the Bhagavad Gita enough? Why should have something new? Just because Sri Aurobindo could write powerful English, is that all that is new here? What is new here? And why do we need this something called new? Now, if you look at the basic spiritual tradition, Indian tradition, you will find that the Indian tradition believes in reality which is an evolving reality. That is why, according to the Indian tradition, God just didn't come once. He keeps coming. Why does God have to come 10 times, 15 times, 20 times? In most religions, God comes once, produces one scripture and goes away. We have gods after gods. It's not very clear how many avatars, how many incarnations we have, whether we have 10 or 15. And I will live happily even with 100 avatars. The very notion of avatar simply suggests that truth is an evolving reality. What existed 5,000 years ago cannot be of full relevance, complete relevance to us. And therefore, when Sri Aurobindo, when we say he is new, it is simply trying to say that he is representing a new manifestation of reality, of the evolving truth. What is this new thing that he has tried to tell the world about? Now, I personally am not somebody tired of this world. I love this world very much. And the reason I love Sri Aurobindo is simply because I love this world. I have turned to other philosophers, I have heard other voices, and I find no other voice, no other approach to life is as satisfying as Sri Aurobindo's life, or as Sri Aurobindo's approach. As I said, I am not basically a spiritual person. I'm a person in love with this world. I like to be alive in this world. I like to be alive as long as I can. I would like to be young as long as I can. I would like to enjoy this world. And so, if someone like me, with a Western education, with this zest for life, with love for life, has turned to Sri Aurobindo, it is not because he has a spiritual message to give me. His spirituality is a spirituality which is basically a materialistic spirituality. A spirituality which says, look, human individuals can live a life of fulfillment as individuals and as collectivities here on earth. So the first thing I would like to emphasize on this day is that this is not an escapist camp. This is not a society for people who are fed up of life. This is a society for people who want to remold life. He wants to build life on better foundations, build life, make it more affluent, make it more effulgent. It is for these people that Sri Aurobindo is talking. So therefore Sri Aurobindo's appeal is always to the young at heart, who are grateful that they are alive, who want to fight and win the battle for mankind. So this is not an escapist society. This is not an escapist approach. This is an approach of people who would like to build this world and make it a better place. You see, in my conception, I have the following idea. Someday, if I have lots of money, I'm going to build a very, very big hall. I will call it a Hall of Fame. And in that Hall of Fame, you will have on the left wall, left side, the photographs of all the saints in the world. You will have photographs of Jesus Christ, whatever representations available, of all Indian saints, all sketches, Krishna, Rama, Raman Maharshi, all these saints will be on this side. On the right-hand side, I have all the great scientists. I will have Newton, I will have Galileo, I will have Einstein, I will have Freud, I will have Marx, I will have Darwin. All these will be on the right, and all these saints will be on the left, and right in the middle I will have Sri Aurobindo. This is not because I am a devotee of Sri Aurobindo. I am not. This is because the aspirations of the scientists and the aspiration of the saints meet and become meaningful only in Sri Aurobindo. He is the one who tries to bring together the saints and the scientists. And in his view, if Raman Maharshi is a great yogi, so was Darwin, so was Einstein, so was Marx. Now the only thing that has happened is, when Marx talks about a revolution, he is talking about an incomplete revolution. When Darwin talks about evolution, he talks about partial evolution, not integral evolution. When, for example, Freud talks about levels of the mind, the subconscious and so on, he is only talking about one part of the mind. And here, Sri Aurobindo fulfills Marx. I would regard Sri Aurobindo as a fulfillment of Marx. I would regard him as a fulfillment of Darwin. I will regard him as a fulfillment of Freud. Take, for example, Marx. And in one sense, I've emphasized this again and again here, that in the entire history of humanity, only two philosophers have hoped for a terrestrial fulfillment for man here on earth and not up there. Now, what did Marx say? Marx said, all right, we will have a perfect society, a happy man, provided you change social system, you change the economic system, automatically you will have a better man. Now, Marx unfortunately was born in Russia. He should have been born in India. He would have understood things better. What happened was, he didn't understand man well enough. He had the right aspirations. He was moving in the right direction, but he had a limited view of man. He thought man basically is the body, and the vital dynamism and the mind. That's all man is, and this man has to be he didn't realize there is something beyond this. Man is basically spirit. And the mind, the vital, and the body, they are only instruments of the spirit. He didn't realize this. So he said, all right, let us change society, let us have a better society, let us have a society free of exploitation. If you have a philosophy which doesn't look at man as a whole, but takes only a partial view of man, what you get very often, instead of the paradise of the proletariat, you get this Stalinist nightmare. This is what you get. And this is you will get everywhere. It's not because Marxism was wrong. It was simply because Marxism was inadequate, Marxism was incomplete. What Marx didn't realize is that the world is what it is, partly because our consciousness is what it is. Unless we do something to change and transform this consciousness, no matter what you do to the world, it is the consciousness will once again reshape the world in its own image. Similarly, take for example Freud. Freud, to my mind, made a wonderful contribution to human knowledge. He for the first time said, look, the mind, the conscious mind is only the tip of the iceberg. And there are many, many other levels of awareness, other levels of consciousness, and very often these levels of consciousness are suppressed. And it is from here the dynamism, the motivation for human living comes. And very often we are asked, how is it? Normally I think I am a very sane and sober person. How did these impulses come in me? And then for the first time, the Westerners realized, this is of course old hat for the spiritual tradition. They always believed there were very many levels of consciousness below the mind and above the mind. But Freudism, which came as an approach to the understanding of the human mind, got transformed into some kind of a consumerism. As a result, what has happened now in the West is going to psychoanalyst is like going for beauty treatment. The seriousness, the thrust that Freud wanted to give to this, that has been taken away, except maybe in a few universities. And by and large, Freud has been converted, as I said, into some kind of a fashionable beauty treatment. Now what Sri Aurobindo is saying is Freud was right that there are levels of consciousness below the conscious mind and these control us, but at the same time he said something Marx had no idea about, and that is there are also levels of consciousness above the mind. And these levels of consciousness above the mind can be acquired, can be attained, and it is possible for man to reach these higher levels of consciousness. Similarly, Darwin, for example. You see, I am taking Darwin, Marx, and Freud because the 20th century has been deeply influenced by these three people. And if you want to give anything to the 20th century, you must give something more than what Marx has given, something more than what Darwin has given, and something more than what Freud has given. Otherwise, you cannot be addressing the 20th century. And what I am trying to say is Sri Aurobindo has basically addressed these concerns. Evolution, take for example the Darwin's notion of evolution. Now this is a fantastic notion. We were taught to believe in the West that God created this world. I don't know how long he took. 7 days, 8 days, he created man like that, and then woman like that. And we all believed this, everybody believed in this. And here is somebody, this Darwin, he says, no, we are all born from the ape, from the monkey. Now this is a terrible, terrible thing to say to somebody who always believed that he was created by God. And if you read some of the novels written during that period, you will find that many Christians began to lose their faith as you lose your shirt or something. It just said, how can we live in a world which says that this world was created not by God, but we are all descended from the monkey? And if you look at the materialistic attack on theologies, on religions and gods, this became the trump card and said, where is this God? This is all blind evolution. Now, the most interesting thing about Sri Aurobindo is, like a clever intellectual gymnast, a clever intellectual wrestler, he uses this very idea of evolution and converts it into something entirely different. He says, yes, there has been an evolution, and this evolution he calls nature's yoga. Nature has been performing yoga. What is evolution? Evolution is a gradually finer and finer organization of consciousness. Now, if you look at what Darwin is basically saying, he is saying that from dead matter, gradually finer and finer forms of consciousness evolve. And if this is what has happened in nature, and Sri Aurobindo says, all right, this is for me, evolution basically is nature's yoga, and he believes that this evolution was not purposeless, was not blind. Now many people are trying to say, look, all that has happened, and you and I, we are all here, people would like to believe that this is all an accident. Now some think, a thinker has said, if this is an accident, what is an accident? The accident that nature has constructed this human body and equipped that human body, this tremendous thing called the brain, which I have always been saying is the most complex thing in the entire galaxy. There is nothing more complex than the human brain. And we would like to believe all this is a series of blind accidents. Somebody has said, yes, if it is an accident, it is an accident of this kind. What kind of an accident? Just imagine you have a huge heap of bricks, and there is a little boy standing by the side of this huge heap. And the little boy takes one brick and throws it like this. And then he goes on throwing these bricks, and probably it takes him about 5 days, 6 days, maybe 6 months, 7 months to throw all these bricks. So at the end of all this, what you find, where the bricks were thrown, there is a multi-storied building. Now naturally this can happen. The first brick falls here, the next brick falls just by the side of it, the third one falls again by the side of it, like that, so they all form one layer. Then again he starts throwing the brick, it will again go and sit on the first brick, so these go one by one, and there is a multi-storied building constructed. Now is this not possible? Nobody would say there can be a series of accidental throwing of bricks which will ultimately form a multi-storied building. Similarly, some people are saying, to say that all this, all that we are today, all that the way that nature has equipped us today, if we want to believe all this is accident, then the word accident here means entirely different. This is a different kind of an accident. So what Sri Aurobindo is trying to say is, there has been an evolution, but this is not an accidental evolution. This is an evolution which has a purpose. It was blind in the sense the carrier of the evolution didn't know it was evolving. For example, when the apes gathered, let us say, I have been always telling this story because this is suggested by Sri Aurobindo himself, a United Nations organization of monkeys, let us say, collected some 1 million years ago. And they all were complaining about, their respective problems and so on, and what solutions there should be, what new regulations and rules they must adopt. And let us say one monkey says, no, let's not worry about this, it's a waste of time. We have been doing it for a long, long time. What I think we should do is try to acquire something called the mind. And naturally, when you say we must acquire something called the mind, other monkeys say, what does the mind do? And this monkey says, all right, with the mind we'll be able to write poetry, we will construct huge buildings, the Taj Mahal and, Beethoven and Shakespeare and so on. The monkeys will not be terribly impressed. They will say, can we still jump from tree to tree? This is the basic monkey concern that we have. And what Sri Aurobindo has been saying is that during this evolution, the monkey didn't understand what was happening to it, and therefore it was blind. But for the first time in creating man, nature has created an instrument which can understand the purpose of this evolution and cooperate with this purpose of evolution. And this cooperative effort that we all put in is called yoga. There is no hanky-panky about yoga. There is no mystery about yoga. Yoga is a certain psychological discipline by which you develop along the lines nature wants you to develop along. That's what basically yoga is. And this is not according to him, a mere accident. This is purposeful, it has a purpose, and therefore, you will see in Sri Aurobindo, therefore, there has been an emphasis on matter. Probably one of these days I will show it to you in the Savitri, the word matter, it has been said, occurs 158 times. And somebody counted all these things and noted that every time Sri Aurobindo uses the word matter, he uses it with a capital M. He never uses it with a small letter. He had such great respect for matter. He had such great respect for social collectivity. And you will see later on, in his yoga, there is no question, there is the talk of an individual finding moksha, an individual finding an escape doesn't arise at all. The purpose, the beginning and the end of Sri Aurobindo's yoga is the cosmic fulfillment, is the fulfillment, the kind of fulfillment that Karl Marx was talking about. Not individual, but society as a whole. So here is, as I pointed out, is a fulfillment in Sri Aurobindo's writings, in Sri Aurobindo's teachings, fulfillment of all the material aspirations of mankind in the 20th century. On the other hand, if you look at the spiritual tradition, you will find that most of the spiritual tradition says that life has to be happy. Of course, we all aspire for bliss, we all aspire for knowledge, we all aspire for truth, but this cannot be fulfilled here on earth, it can only be fulfilled somewhere else. And Sri Aurobindo is saying, look, when I was talking about these things, of all the people, an American once challenged me and said, how can you say that? I was trying to say, the traditional religious belief basically has been to say that this world is a school. You go to school not to fulfill yourself, but train yourself, and the fulfillment is outside the school. The fulfillment comes after you have finished your studies, and later on when you take up a profession or do something, there the fulfillment comes. And so, we are here being put through all the various phases and all the sufferings and everything, so that after we have finished with this world, we have a safe and a comfortable birth outside there in the heaven. That is because religions believed the touch of the earth is corrupting, and therefore truth, beauty and happiness in their ideal form cannot be realized here. Now, Sri Aurobindo points out, why should we worry about escaping from this world? What is called the nirvana, what is called the peace, the joy, what we are talking about. After all, where have we come from? Where have we come from? And all philosophers tell you that we have all come from the divine. We have all come from what is called Satchidananda. That's where we have come from. Now, after having come from Satchidananda, why are you in a hurry to get back there? We have come here on earth because we have something to achieve here on earth. What is it that we have to achieve here on this earth? In Savitri, again, there are many, many lines which ask this question. Shall we go back to God empty-handed? God sent us here. One became many. The one divine became many of us. And shall we just run away, throwing our body, mind, the vital energy, everything to be thrown, and we just go empty-handed back to where we came from? Why did we come here for? We came here because there is a purpose to our existence, and the purpose is to be here in the body and live like gods, to be in the body, in the physical body, and live like gods. Realize immortality, realize bliss, realize truth, realize knowledge, and find fulfillment individually and collectively. If this is not worth achieving, what else is worth achieving? And therefore, this Sri Aurobindo's insistence that what we have, the aim of this existence is basically to enjoy this world. God created this world so that the world can be enjoyed. In the Ishavasa itself says, God created this world for enjoyment. But this enjoyment is possible only if you live the world the right way. Now, I have been emphasizing one particular aspect of Sri Aurobindo's writings and Sri Aurobindo's teachings. I haven't talked about anything about his spiritual approach, his yoga. None of these I have emphasized because normally people believe that it is only limited to this. And therefore I started at the other end. Now, all this fulfillment, material fulfillment, individual's fulfillment, social fulfillment, how do we achieve this fulfillment? What is the way to achieve this fulfillment? The way to achieve this fulfillment, Sri Aurobindo says, is for the individual first to realize that he is not just the body, the mind, and the emotions. He is basically the spirit. Okay. Once you realize you are basically the spirit, and you stay with that realization, the body, the mind, and the emotions, if they are left untouched, untransformed, the life will go on as it is. So what Sri Aurobindo believes is, it is possible for man, after realizing his spiritual status, to achieve a new power, a new dynamism which he calls the supermind. And with the help of this new dynamism, transform the body, transform the mind, and transform our emotional, the vital dynamism. So he talks about a new kind of man, a new kind of consciousness. And it is for this he struggled all his life. You see, as we all know, in the year 1910, as I have been tracing his life here while we were reading Savitri, Sri Aurobindo was the foremost leader of what is called the extremist party in India at that time, along with Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Lala Lajpat Rai. He was one of the extremist leaders. You also know that Sri Aurobindo missed the hangman's noose very, very narrowly. For a whole year he was in the Alipur jail, and everybody believed, the British believed that they had, in fact, Sri Aurobindo was in their net and they would be able to finish him off. But he came out and he was the real leader of the extremist party, and suddenly he disappeared and went to Pondicherry for 40 years. And he himself has said this. It's not because he himself has said this. What concerned him at that point was he knew India was going to be free. India was going to be independent. There used to be a sadhak, a devotee of Sri Aurobindo called Purani. And if you remember, you see, people get a very deceptive kind of notion about Sri Aurobindo. When you look at the beard and so on, you think, he must be somebody who didn't know the world. He was not concerned about the world. If there was anything he was concerned about, it was the world. Now, when he was in Baroda as a professor of English, what he was doing, of course, he was doing his studies, he was writing and so on. He was also directing, guiding an underground movement. He was saying, what first has to come to India is what is called a Kshatra Tej. The power has to come to young people. India is like a tiger, a lion who is dormant. The tiger has to be awakened. So, through his students, in the whole of Gujarat, a movement was about to start, and that is, secretly you start gymnasia where young people go, and these young people go, and the British would look favorably on this kind of an activity. So you say we are going there for physical activities and gradually imbibe in them the spirit of patriotism, maybe teach them how to make bombs, maybe teach them how to fight wars. All these things have to be taught. That was in his idea in the first decade of the century. Now, one of his main lieutenants was this Purani and his brother. So in 1918, about 29 years before India ever became free, this Purani came to Pondicherry to take further instructions from Sri Aurobindo. He said, look, you had given us this task, we have achieved this task, now what do we do from now on? Sri Aurobindo told him that was not necessary and asked him, why don't you turn to spiritual life? Now Purani said, no spiritual life for me. As long as India remains in bondage, no spirituality for me. Spirituality can come later. Then Sri Aurobindo told him, suppose I gave you the assurance that India is going to be free, will you then turn to spiritual life? Then this man asked, you are only saying, suppose I gave you the assurance, will you give me the assurance? And he said, yes. I'll give you the assurance that India will be free. And so he knew in 1910 that India was going to be free. What he was concerned about is, what will India do with freedom? What will world do with the freedom? This was what he was concerned about. And he, as our president just now said, he spent 40 years. What did he do during these 40 years? We don't know. But he has left various kinds of records. And one good record is a poem called God's Labor. I'll read out sections of that poem just before I conclude. The poem is called God's Labor, and it seems when he wrote that poem, the mother, it seems, remarked, you have laid bare all our inner secrets. It's one sense an autobiographical poem. Now, in these 40 years, Sri Aurobindo, of course, if you know the Life Divine and all these basic things that he wrote, they were written between 1914 and 1920. Now, after 1920, Sri Aurobindo was busy in his sadhana, and these are matters which people who have faith, who have devotion in him, will probably accept more readily than others. Others probably will have to wait until the work is done. In these 40 years, what he was trying to do is, first of all, what he was talking about, the super mind or the higher powers of the mind, it's not enough to talk about them. What is important is to acquire them. And when one man acquires, it is not the acquisition of that person, it is the acquisition of that man as a representative of mankind. And so acquiring that is very, 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 very difficult. You see, running away, ignoring the body, ignoring the mind, ignoring the vital dynamism, and be your pure individual self and rise high in your consciousness, that probably is easy. But keeping this body, keeping the vital dynamism, keeping the human body, and yet with all this baggage, try to rise and acquire the new power and bring that power and transform this world, that was difficult. How do we do it? And Sri Aurobindo believed that it can be done. If there is anything that is worth doing, that's the one thing worth doing. That's what he said. And he was so confident about it, he has said, even if the whole world were to say that I am following a chimera, I am following something which will never be realized, I won't be deterred. I have the fullest confidence that this evolution of man, the further evolution of man, is inevitable. This is not any individual's purpose, seems to be the whole nature's purpose. And in these 40 years, he got this power within himself. Now this power is not acquired to mesmerize the world. This power is not acquired to acquire more and more devotees. Our secretary and I, we always talk about the activities of this society. And I said, look, Sri Aurobindo never believed in taking his teachings and propagating them. Here is truth. If there is truth and truth has value, people will come to this truth. You don't have to go convert people, make members, build a sect. None of these things is necessary. In fact, if I speak, I am grateful that I am given this opportunity to speak, because that's the only service I can do. I can't do any other service. I am not a yogi. I am not a saint. The only thing I am doing is this. So it's not something I do for the society. The society is doing something for me. What is it? So that providing me an opportunity so that I can speak. So basically, what Sri Aurobindo was trying to do is this very, very difficult thing, which is being the pioneer, not of a new philosophy, not of a new political approach, but of an entirely new stance in the evolutionary pilgrimage. See, what does this mean? When will this happen? When will the supermind come? You see, scientists tell us that since the earth all this, what we call the solar system broke away and, the earth was formed, billions and billions of years have passed. So many billions that if you put all the zeros, you won't even understand it. So what scientists do is for the understanding of people like you and me who are not scientists, they say, all right, let us put it this way. Let us suppose right from the day this earth was formed, the earth was formed exactly, let us say, 1 year ago. Let us kind of compress it on this scale. 1 year ago, on the 1st, let us say, on the 1st of January 1984, the earth was formed, let us say. Right? When was man born? We are taking the scale from 84 January, 1st of January, to 84 31st December midnight, 12 o'clock, the beginning of 85th. That's 1 year scale. So if the earth came into being on the 1st of January, human beings appeared on this earth at 10:30 p.m. on 31st December 1984. That has been the duration that man has occupied on this time scale. And we are talking about this kind of a cosmic dimension. You see, in this entire thing, an individual's life will be something like 1 second in a year. So those of us who live for 1 second, how can we even judge, look back on a whole year's perspective? So it is very, very difficult for us to look at the perspective, and therefore when we are impatient we say, Sri Aurobindo wrote about this 30 years ago, Sri Aurobindo wrote about this 40 years ago, nothing is happening, in fact things are getting bad. This is true, things are getting bad. We are looking at it from a small, narrow perspective. Sri Aurobindo himself said, this is not something that will happen in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years, it will take much longer. And this is one approach which doesn't make a distinction between Eastern and Western, doesn't say Indians are spiritual, so Indians alone will come here, Westerns are materialistic. He doesn't say any of these things. He says this is a humanity's quest where everybody has a part. West has a role to play, the East has a role to play, and we should all come together. And this is he talks about one world, he talks about humanity together ascending to this higher fulfillment. And it is this hope that he holds out for us. And those of us who believe in him, those of us who have a touch of him, also believe that he gave his life, his physical body, in order to make this possible for mankind. Mother herself has said that when Sri Aurobindo realized that the circumstances for this new consciousness to arrive are not favorable, that mankind is not ready, he decided to sacrifice his own physical body. So here is somebody who is an eternal warrior. As Mrs. Diane said, he has been a warrior in this cause of mankind. Not only did he give his nights and days, not only did he give all his learning, he also gave his entire life, the whole life, and he embraced what is called physical death, such that this becomes a reality, a possibility for mankind someday. And here today, we have assembled to remember this man with gratitude, so that we ask ourselves, when we are surrounded by all this gloom, and when people prophesy, look, even Ronald Reagan, I am told, recently made a joke about bombing Russia, and people were horrified. Everywhere, all over the world, people are horrified. So when we live in the shadow of death, the shadow of the atomic holocaust, when you don't know why people are fighting in my country. People are fighting, the Punjabis are fighting, the Sikhs are fighting, the non-Sikhs. Iran and Iraq are fighting. Christians are fighting. Everywhere there is fight. What are they fighting for? What is involved, we really don't know. And a situation like this, when scientists are telling, look, psychologists are saying that man is paranoid, politicians are saying, look, there is so much atomic stockpile here, the world will blow up any time, any day. When all these things are happening, when people are saying, look, there is a population explosion, there is energy crisis, there is everywhere you go there are crises and so on. Sri Aurobindo is the man who says, look, all these crises are basically the manifestation of one crisis, and that is the crisis of human consciousness. It's a crisis of consciousness, and this crisis can only be solved by bringing a power which is higher than the mind. And that's why it seems to me that even if people argued, somebody who is more intelligent than I am, were to argue and convince me that what Sri Aurobindo said will never happen, I will still believe that this is the only thing worth trying. Because, as I said, he doesn't leave out anybody, he doesn't leave any legitimate aspiration of mankind. And here is somebody, therefore, whom the world in the 21st century, in the next millennium, will remember with gratitude. We probably, some of us, remember him now, but as we see, Sri Aurobindo will be realized. But I would like to say one thing to conclude. Sri Aurobindo will not be realized in terms in which we understand him today. Sri Aurobindo is not narrow. He is not. The very first day I said, wherever there is an aspiration for human spirit to blossom, in whatever field of life it may be, there Sri Aurobindo's presence will be felt. He is not a Hindu. He is not an Indian alone. He stood for all these notions like somebody being a Hindu, somebody being an Indian. They all are obscurantist notions. The earlier we forget them, the better. Of course, we need these definitions, we need passports, we need visas, all these things are true. They are all for our practical business, but basically, humanity's inner soul has now reached a stage when it says all the little narrow identities that we have must be given up. And it is Sri Aurobindo who comes at a juncture like this to assure mankind that our future is safe, provided we turn to the call of nature, and the call of nature is the call of God. As I said, I will now conclude reading a few stanzas from a poem of his called God's Labor. A God's Labor. I have gathered my dreams in a silver air between the gold and the blue, and wrapped them softly and left them there, my jeweled dreams of you. I had hoped to build a rainbow bridge, marrying the soil to the sky, and sow in this dancing planet midge the moods of infinity. But too bright were our heavens, too far away, too frail their ethereal stuff, too splendid and sudden our light could not stay. The roots were not deep enough. He who would bring the heavens here must descend himself into clay, and the burden of earthly nature bear, and tread the dolorous way. Coercing my Godhead, I have come down here on this sordid earth, ignorant, laboring, human grown, twixt the gates of death and birth. Mrs. Dayan was saying, what did Sri Aurobindo do for 40 years? We can only guess. He was saying, nobody really knows the answer. Sri Aurobindo has answered this year. I have been digging deep and long mid a horror of filth and mire. I have been digging deep and long mid a horror of filth and mire, a bed for the golden river's song, a home for the deathless fire. And later on he says, my gaping wounds are 1,001, and the Titan kings assail, but I cannot rest till my task is done and wrought the eternal will. When he is doing this, people are suspicious, people have no faith. What do they say? How they mock and sneer, both devils and men. It's not just the devils who sneer, but also people like you and me. How they mock and sneer, both devils and men. And what do they say? Thy hope is chimera's head. painting the sky with its fiery stain, thou shalt fall, and thy work lie dead. Who art thou that babblest of heavenly ease, and joy and golden room, to us who are waifs on inconscient seas, and bound to life's iron doom? This earth is ours, a field of night, for our petty flickering fires. How shall it brook the sacred light, or suffer a god's desires? If you persist, what these dark forces do? Come, let us slay him and end his course. Then shall our hearts have release from the burden and call of his glory and force, and the curb of his white, wide peace. I shall leave my dreams in their argent air, for in a raiment of gold and blue, then shall move on the earth embodied and fair, the living truth of you. This is a poem, those of you who have the time should try to read it. This is page 99. It's called A God's Labor. What does God do? We have an idea. When God comes down to earth, he performs miracles. He stands here and just turns his hand and suddenly you have whatever you want. There was a very interesting, I'll conclude with a little anecdote. In Hyderabad last year, there was some Christians conference. And Christians as usual, they had put these little posters saying, Jesus saves. Jesus saves. That's what they normally say. When Christians say this, some non-Christians didn't like it. And so they wanted to be very smart, and they put counter posters. And the counter posters said, if Jesus saves, how is it that he couldn't save himself? Meaning thereby, how is it that he couldn't come down from the cross? That was the counter propaganda. People don't realize the fact that he didn't come down from the cross proves that he was God, proves that he was Christ. If he was a magician, he would have come down from the cross and run away. Christ was not a cheap magician. Christ was God. And God is he who has the capacity to drink your sorrows, capacity to drink your poisons, digest them for you. That is why Sri Aurobindo says, I have been digging deep in all this mire and filth for humanity. If anybody works like this for humanity as a whole, it can only be God. And therefore, God, when we use the term God, we are using it in a particular sense. We are using it as somebody who gives us hope to live by. And I have no doubt in my mind, my intellectual stamina may be wanting, my eloquence may be wanting, but Sri Aurobindo transcends all these things, and he is the only hope for man as I see it.